The East Coast versus the West Coast. The differences are well documented.
The 13 original colonies. Wild Wild West. It was all a dream. Ambitions of a rider. Fast-paced, chill. Formal, casual. Straightforward and blunt. Politically correct. Shake Shack, in and out. Public transportation, driving your own car. Mad, hella.
And we could go on and on and on and talk about the many general differences between the East and the West Coast.
But today in this video, let's just talk about the differences that are specific to being Asian.
Why? Because we're Asian. And so to do this video, you know we had to bring in West Coast expert, Victoria.
West Coast is the best coast.
And East Coast expert, Angie.
East Coast, Beast Coast, born and raised.
All right, so we got a West Coast Asian and we got an East Coast Asian. Which coast is better?
West Coast.
Whoa, you guys. Let's just talk about the differences.
First question, which coast has more Asians?
Well, not to brag, but between California and Hawaii, they have half the Asian population. So I think it's safe to say that more Asians live in the West Coast.
Well, true, because outside New York and New Jersey, there aren't that many Asians on the East Coast. And it does make sense because the West Coast is closer to Asia.
So would you say that West Coast Asians are way more likely to be in an Asian bubble?
Yes, definitely. On the East Coast, we're constantly around a lot of other people. It gives us perspective.
Yes, on the West Coast, you can definitely get stuck in a big, comfortable Asian bubble. But is there anything wrong with that?
And yes, of all people, we would know the pros and cons of living in an Asian bubble. And honestly, just to be real, having that option of living in an Asian bubble is way better than not having that option at all.
Is it true that East Coast Asians are more diverse in their outlook on different types of people?
Yeah, on the East Coast, you're constantly walking the streets, taking the subway, taking the train, so you're always exposed to a lot of people from different walks of life.
Yeah, that's kind of true. I mean, everything on the West Coast is really spread out. You have to drive your own car, so you don't have to be around anybody you don't really want to be around.
I'm in my world, I see you in your world, but I'm in my world, and we don't have to meet. Oh yeah.
I heard that East Coast Asians are much more traditional when it comes to picking careers, while West Coast Asians are more adventurous.
Yeah, East Coast Asians primarily focus on business, law, finance, medicine, journalism, politics. Yeah, you know, stereotypical young Asian professional stuff. Yappies! We get raised as model minorities to get Fortune 500 jobs.
Don't get me wrong, we have our fair share of yappies in the West Coast too. But on the West Coast, even as Asians, we feel more free to pursue riskier careers such as entertainment, tech startups, freelance, music, dancing, new media, or maybe just doing nothing at all. Yeah, I don't really know yet. I'm just trying different things out.
You got to put in the work. Do you know how much rent costs out here?
If you're not moving forward, you're slipping back.
You'll probably meet a lot more Asian artists on the West Coast, like YouTubers. And to be honest, on the East Coast, aside from fashion, I don't really know that many Asians that have cool or hip jobs.
So would it be safe to say that East Coast Asians take life more seriously?
Yeah, on the East Coast, we have to shovel our own snow. I mean, there are people with suits and briefcases everywhere. It's serious business.
Yeah, I mean, just having the beach right there makes everything way more laid back. And we like it that way.
Why so serious, East Coast Asians?
So if the West Coast is way closer to Asia, how does that affect the way the Asian communities form?
Yeah, I mean, historically, Asian communities have been on the West Coast a lot longer than they've been on the East Coast. On the West Coast, it's not uncommon to meet a third, fourth, or even fifth generation Asian American.
Once in San Francisco, I met this 90-year-old Asian lady who spoke perfect English. It blew my mind. On the East Coast, most Asians are either immigrants or children of immigrants, like me.
So would you say that East Coast Asians actually have more Asian culture and West Coast Asians have more Asian American culture?
Yeah, East Coast Asians are still pretty in touch with their roots. We still celebrate traditional holidays in traditional ways, and we either play Asian instruments or classical instruments.
Yeah, any cool AZN trends that we have, they pretty much came from the West Coast.
Something West Coast Asians really like to do is take Asian culture and American culture and fuse it into something brand new. AZN culture. For example, breakdancing and hip-hop choreography, the import JDM car scene, import and Instagram modeling, the Asian fitness craze, the Asian YouTube world, Asian rave scene, and finally, boba and vapes. You would call all these things AZN, and they all come from the West Coast.
I heard that West Coast Asians are way more into playing sports and working out.
Because West Coast Asian parents are less old school, they allow their kids to pursue professional athletics as a career. For example, Jeremy Lin, Michelle Wee, Christy Yamaguchi, Michelle Kwan, Kurt Suzuki. Even Asian athletes from Asia live here in the West Coast, like Manny Pacquiao.
Yeah, okay, the East Coast didn't produce many Asian professional athletes, but let me explain why. It's because the weather's not as nice, so we can't really be as active. It's cramped, so there's less space for sports. and our parents don't support it. But that being said, there are still a few exceptions.
I heard that East Coast Asians have to deal with more racism and they take racial issues way more seriously.
Okay, racism definitely still exists on the West Coast, but we just don't talk about it as much because 1, racism out here is not in your face as much, and 2, it's just easier to pretend that racism doesn't exist here. We're pretty much just all about being comfortable.
One of the biggest differences between West Coast Asians and East Coast Asians is that East Coast Asians have experienced in-your-face racism at least a few times in their lives.
Wow, your English is so good for an Asian. Yo, I heard Asians eat dogs, is that true? Yo, ni hao, I know you Chinese, why don't you give me some of that mushu?
Hey, guys are ignorant everywhere, but on the West Coast, they're just a little more tactful.
Oh, so you're Korean? I love Korean barbecue and kimchi. We should get it sometime.
I heard that East Coast Asians dress way more conservative and less flashy than West Coast Asians.
Correct. On the East Coast, we're dressing to go to work, so our style is a little more formal and professional. You know, darker colors and brands like Banana Republic, J. Crew, business casual. Have you seen Alexander Wang's new fall collection? Darling, it's to die for.
Because New York is the fashion capital and it's so far away from us, the West Coast definitely has a looser sense of fashion. Yeah, I really like this top, but I wish it were like 2 inches shorter. Like this. No, wait, like this. And let's be real, out here, it's much more important what your body looks like than what you put on it.
All right, you guys, that's it for East Coast Asians versus West Coast Asians. I know that that was a lot of information. So basically, the East Coast of America is a very old society that had a very strong culture, so Asians as immigrants had to fit into what was already there. And that dictates the spaces that Asians can fit into society.
And since the West Coast is a newer society with less tradition, Asians have much more freedom and flexibility in how they're involved in that society.
I know we made it sound like living on the West Coast is way more comfortable for Asians, and that may be true,
but we acknowledge that there are way different opportunities on each of the coasts, and we know a lot of East Coast Asians that really love and prefer the East Coast.
So really, it depends on what you want out of life.
In the comments below, let us know which coast fits you better.
Get in where you fit in.
All right, you guys, thank you so much for watching that video about East Coast Asians versus West Coast Asians. I know that this topic is super complicated and we were not able to get everything we wanted to say across in this video. So definitely, if you want to go to the East Coast and you can make it, I think that you could do some really, really crazy things. Whereas on the West Coast, I definitely think it's more supportive for Asians here. At the end of the day, it really just depends on what type of person you are and what kind of opportunities you want to chase.
Last thing to remember is, we just made it up. Watch this video here, watch this video here, subscribe to our channel. Shout out to Victoria and Angie for being in our video.
Born and raised in Yonkers, I'm Angie. Check out my Instagram below.
Hey, I'm Victoria. I've been in other videos, but make sure to follow me on social media. Links below.
All right, thank you everybody for watching, and until next time, we out. Peace.